Well, I had a tremendous interview with a lady called Amanda Barron Frank. And Amanda is a managing partner of a law firm, and she has got so much experience, and it was just brilliant to talk to her. One thing that we did talk about was the ability as a leader to actually change someone's life. And we as leaders have that impact. We are able to change people's lives. But the other thing too, we talked about that it's easy to leave change to others. But really, should we be doing that as a leader, or should we be taking the lead? The other thing was about willpower. To find the leader. What an awesome statement. And of course, that's the title of this episode. Hey, sit back and enjoy the episode.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis Gianoutsos.
Hey there, listeners. Welcome to another wonderful episode of the Leadership is Changing podcast. Great to have you here with us. I've got a great guest with me. Her name is Amanda Frank. Amanda, a massive welcome to you.
Thank you so much, Dennis. It's so nice to be here, and thank you for having me.
Excellent. Now, whereabouts in the world are you today?
I am on Long Island in New York, a
Excellent.
little way from you.
Yeah, just a little way, yeah. Actually, listeners, we just, before we hit record, actually just said to Amanda, I'm just down the road from you in New Zealand.
Yeah.
And yeah, right. Yeah. And as we're recording this, listeners, what's quite funny is that the eclipse is happening right now for Amanda. And so it's pretty exciting times.
In dark.
Yeah, going into the dark. Well, sometimes that what happens in leadership, we get into the dark. We get into areas which are a little bit, we're not sure where we're going. And we're going to talk about that with Amanda very soon as well. Amanda, I've given a very brief sort of introduction to you. Tell us more about you, your background, and what you do.
Sure. So I am an attorney. I was born in New Jersey and came from a very entrepreneur-like family. My dad was an attorney, and I met my husband in law school at St. John's University in Queens, New York. And so if there's any Johnnies listening, I'm sure they'll be very happy and proud.
Is that what you call it? You call yourselves the alumni Johnnies?
That's their team, the Johnnies. They're like, I guess they're mascots. Yeah, we met in law school. Tommy, my husband, is a year older than me in law school, so he graduated before me. And I went out to Miami right after law school to do a contract as a prosecutor at Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office. And I did that for a little bit. My husband came, took the bar, moved out. At the time, he was my boyfriend, and we moved back to New York after we decided we wanted to settle down and have a family. And so we came home, and I was in-house counsel for a plastic surgery company and a NASDAQ company.
Hmm.
And then my husband was working as an attorney for a very well-respected, very large law firm. And he left to start his own firm, and it was just getting so big. So it was either he hires someone or I come aboard, and I came aboard. And 6 years later, here we are.
Wow. Awesome. Tell me, I see also in your resume that you helped start the Kings County District Attorney's Office anti-bullying program. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So like almost every kid, I don't want to speak for everybody, but we all have our bullies and our scars. And so I was bullied my whole life for my weight. I was a very overweight kid, and I had weight loss surgery at 17 years old and lost a great deal of weight, but was faced bullying my whole life. When I applied for law school, on my personal statement, I talked about the bullying. When I had my weight loss surgery, People magazine, which I'm not sure if it's by you, but it's a pretty big magazine here, they did a big story on me. And from that, a bunch of Good Morning America, Today's Show, like a bunch of Oprah, Tyra Banks, like it picked up over here. Because at that time, bullying was a huge issue, but nobody was talking about it, especially kids.
Hmm.
And so I was willing to talk about it at that time. And then I wrote about it in my personal statement. And at the time, the DA for Kings County in Brooklyn, Charles Hines, read my personal statement and said, you have to do something with this. I feel everything off of these pages. It's like so palpable. And so we started this unit at the DA's office where basically myself and a very seasoned DA went to all the schools in Brooklyn, or a good portion of them, and spoke about the moral and legal ramifications of bullying. And it was very impactful. We got a lot of positive feedback, and I hope helped a lot of people.
Mm.
Unfortunately, it had to stop because I was in law school and or can't remember if I was in college or law school at that time, but either way, I was in school and just couldn't really devote as much time as I like. But it is always something that is at the forefront of my mind where I'd like to pursue something like that because it was really just one of the most rewarding things that I've done.
You know what? We still see that today, even in the corporate world, the business world, the community world. There's still going on, not just with young ones, but also with adults as well. And yeah, we see it happening a lot as well. Yep, yep. It's not that great at all.
Yeah.
Tell us, how did you actually get into leadership yourself?
So it's really hard for me to imagine myself as a leader. It's like a very tough thing to say, but if you phrase leadership more as like somebody who has the benefit of being in somewhat of a powerful position, but still able to help others achieve that or be with you along the ride, then sure, that's what I am. But I started the firm with my husband, and we basically just any employees we have or any colleagues that we have, we just always lend a helping hand. We always remember if any of our friends are thinking about starting a law firm or wanting to start a business, we are like the first ones to jump on board to help them
Hmm.
and let them know what the ebbs and flows would be and how we can make that transition easier. So I think those are I wouldn't, again, classify myself as a leader, but I would classify those as leadership qualities, and that is certainly what we tried to do.
Yeah, and I think even what you were talking about before about the anti-bullying program and what you wrote and then you being involved with that, that's leadership as well. That's you going out and doing things. And I think the big thing for me is that leadership is really influence, and it's about how you can be influential in whatever you do to help others as well be the best that they can be and moving forward.
And I think, to your point, how it's changing, just the type of boss, if you will, you can't really speak for everybody because obviously there's all types of people, all types of boss. But for myself, I witnessed growing up, my parents had a lot of businesses. I was around a lot of business owners, and it was more of like an intense way of owning a business, right? Like, don't use your phone. You can't have a break. You can't do this. Like, lunch is exactly 30 minutes. And it was very intense.
Mm.
And I think that in today's time, or at least I hope, and I'm not saying for everybody, but for us at least, we're like a little bit more relaxed with those things because those types of things I think mean more important to people than, of course, money talks, right? But if you were to give people quality of life and just make them feel like a person and that you actually care about their day to day or their family or things like that, and not just like clock in, clock out, and what you can do for me within those hours, it makes a person want to stay with you regardless if they're disgruntled about their salary or whatever's going on in life, or it just makes a better person, which will ultimately make a better employee. And so I think that is like the largest thing that I've seen, being able to be in that position, to be able to be an employer and be able to make those change, the things that I hated as an employee. That's a really rewarding thing, and that's a big thing that's changed. I know not everybody, but I've seen many, many business owners handle themselves in that way, which is wonderful.
Yep. Excellent. All right. So we're going to get into leadership is changing soon and talk more about that. But I just got a quick question here for you. Now, this person could be alive or from history. Well, actually, before I go there, because I said to you before, we'll talk about the darkness and sometimes with the eclipse, and we were talking about that. Let's go to that first, and then I'll come back to that other question. So the eclipse is happening around the world. Well, actually, in the Americas, you're getting to see that, and there's darkness sometimes. And we talked a little bit about that before we started hitting record. A lot of people see ambiguity, and it's going to probably talk about that within the leadership is changing question. What do people need to do in the relation to that ambiguity, that adversity, things like we face with the pandemic as well? What should they be doing as leaders?
Yeah, I really think look, we're all here in business to make money,
Hmm.
right? We all have families to support. We all have livelihoods to support. But I think in line with that, people need to look at their employees as human and understand that just the simple things that you would want as a person if you gave to them would mean the world to them and give you and pay your company dividends in return after that because they're just so appreciative that you were appreciative of them. Simple things, right? Like if this employee has young kids and they're sick and they have to go pick them up from school, if it doesn't happen too frequently, don't dock them pay. Like, I really hope everything is okay. Go, don't worry. And send them a text and say, is everything okay? Like, that is how we
Mm.
do things. And I believe that's why we've had the loyalty in the 6 years that we've been in business. So I think that that is what needs to change. And not that I'm like into a male female divide, because I just think that adds more clout to something that might already be divided. But I think that there needs to be more change in the workplace to accommodate a woman who usually is the default parent in most cases and would be able to turn around a better work product for your company and ultimately be better for your business if you just worked with her schedule. And I say her because, again, we're referencing them as being usually the default parent. If an employer were able to do that or do that, I believe they would see dividends from that employee, a much better work environment, and the ability to change somebody's life, right? To see longevity with that employee because they don't get to a point where they're just so fed up with you because that employer actually cares about you. So to me, I think that that's the most important part of the equation.
Well, I think that's what leadership's about as well, is right. It's about building communities. It's about helping people. And so I love what the words that you just said there, which was the ability to change someone's life. And I think that if we can do that more as leaders, that's a great thing. Even with our customers, if we're able to provide a service, a product, or something that helps change their life for the better, great.
Right.
That's something as well, right? So it's something that can be applied to many different areas, different scenarios. Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're obviously a law firm. All we do is help people. My husband specifically deals mostly with financial distress, so bankruptcy, foreclosure, commercial litigation. And I do mostly foreclosure, real estate, and commercial transactional, real estate transactional work. And like we had one client just recently who was just on the verge of losing their house. This was only a couple of days ago. And he sent both my kid presents and said, I need to do this. And my husband was like, why? I did my job. He goes, no, no, no. Writing the papers is doing your job. Having the compassion is you. And I need to thank you because I was at a low. And like that really, in my mind, is showing that compassion both to, like you said, your customers or your employees. Like not forgetting why we're supposed to be here in life
Mm.
and what we're supposed to do here, which is hard, right? Because the day to day stress is taxing. But if you ultimately just try for majority of your day to do that, then that is what a leader should be doing.
Very powerful and what they did in that. But yeah, it's great. And nothing, I don't know about for you, but for me, I'm sure it is for you. It's very pleasing to see when you help somebody and then they go on to do other things. It's just really quite wonderful to see and experience.
Yeah, for
Mm.
sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
All right. So let's get to that question. Who's your favorite leader and why? Now, this person could be alive or from history. Who's your favorite leader and why?
So we spoke about this prior to hitting on, and I had said that I really struggled with picking one person, but I did find a commonality between all the ones that I thought about, right? So if we have to pick a person, then perhaps Winston Churchill, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, like there's like a host of people. And really the commonality between those people is that they looked adversity straight in its face, laughed, and kept going. And sure, it's like really easy to get scared and put your head in the sand and just say, like, okay, I'll leave change up to someone else. But these people did not. And these are the people, these are why these people shape the world. I almost feel like we're losing people like that in this world, in this day, because I tried to think of more people of history right now. And the list gets shorter and shorter and shorter. And I think it's just because everybody, at least in America, is really caught up on the wrong
Mm.
things rather than influencing the right change, like the bones of what could create a great country, great people, a great civilization. We're focusing on the minutia of like BS, in my opinion. Whereas these people took the task at hand, looked it straight in the eye, and said, no matter what, I'm going to keep going. And I'm sure it was so scary. I'm sure they had so many death threats. I'm sure there was so much to be scared about and unsure about, especially not having the technology that we have today to know, what's going on around them. But they didn't. They weren't scared and they kept going and they kept pushing through. And the commonality between them all is that they really did look at adversity and push through without stopping. And it's that willpower that I believe defines a leader.
Nice. I love that. The willpower defines the leader. Actually, got to write that down. So the willpower defines the leader. Excellent. I tell you what, I like what you also said. It's more or less like they were the leader for the times, right? We find a leader for the times, and a leader always tends to show up. And it may not be the leader we like, it may not be the leader we want, but sometimes they do turn up for the times as well. You
Yeah.
said earlier on that it's easy to leave change to others. Now, what should we do if we see change needs to happen? What should we do as individuals? What do you think?
I'm hypocritical to answer this question because in the US, we really need change right now, specifically. And so I have, ever since COVID, have really grappled with getting into politics and then just chickening out because I didn't want to subject my family to the scrutiny of it and the emotional roller coaster of it. And so when we were in COVID and turned to my husband, I was like, I need to do something. I feel this need to do something. I have to find a way to do it. And I would Google how to become a senator, how to become a congresswoman, how to do this, how to do that, but ultimately did nothing because life and children and fear and all of these things kick in. And so these are all the things that these people that we just previously talked about may have had, but didn't let stop them.
Mm, mm,
And so perhaps the answer to that question is just to be the change that you wish to see. Also, to hear people, because a lot of people just want to hear themselves speak and want to hear their position heard when there is no substance behind it or no backing, and it's really not for the common good. It's just to make their point heard, which is why there's a lot of trouble or a lot of hatred towards some political figures or some people in this world. And so I think it's just, I think like the politicians, especially in the US, everybody does a good job at saying what they want to do to make a majority listen and vote, but no one's actually listening.
mm.
Because if they were, then these issues would and could be on the track of being fixed. So
Yeah, yeah.
that's,
I know you said about looking at becoming a senator, congresswoman. I think you're thinking a little bit too small. What about president?
oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, right.
I
Um,
wouldn't want that type of pressure. I already have gray hair.
oh, it's amazing. It's actually, I think, a massive role. It's a very lonely role in the sense. But if you've got the right people around you, it's really good. Be the change you wish to see. I think the willpower defines the leaders. Great stuff that you've shared there as well. But I don't think you only just have to be a politician to be a leader. There's plenty of other
Sure.
things that we can get on with too. So yeah, it's really important there. Now, one of the, Rosie Park or Winston Churchill or Martin Luther King, whoever you choose, the next question for you is if you were to sit on a park bench with one of them, what would be one question you would love to ask them?
Ooh, that's an amazing question. So I guess the answer to that question is very simple for me because I pretty much only read biographies. And the reason why I read biographies is because I want to figure out what people did wrong and what they would do next time to fix it. And so I'd probably ask them, what would you do differently next time around? Or if you had the opportunity to do something differently, what would it be? Just to really get in the minds of that, maybe that insecurity or that change and be able to make a difference with that information.
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of that insecurity comes from, or the ambiguity, and people struggle is the knowledge. If we can understand, if you knew tomorrow what tomorrow was going to bring and what the outcome would be, you'll be going into that day a lot more confident
Sure.
than you wouldn't be if you were the opposite. So I think the thing is that the beautiful thing I like what you're doing here is that you're actually reading these autobiographies to learn, to understand, and you're understanding, okay, what they did well, what they didn't do too well, but what will they do to fix it? That's the
Sure.
learning part, right? That's massive.
I think that's a lot of people's problems, right? I have had the ability to be around very powerful businessmen and women. And something that always strikes me is their inability to see wrong in anything that they're doing.
Mhm.
And not all of them, but some of them. And if only they were able to just look in the mirror and be able to learn their fault or from other people, then like that person could be remarkable, but their fault is because they just can't look in the mirror and take some accountabilities. And that's a tough personality to deal with. So those are the type of personalities that should benefit from books like that, but don't
Yeah.
always do.
I worked with a leader once, very smart, very, intelligent, knew their subject matter expert, their topic, their domain, great communicator, if I can put it that way with a question mark. It was the whole package, except for one thing. They were such a jerk to everybody. And she was like that. And I'm like, why do you need to be like that? Because you've got everything else. What happens if you just, like you just said, look in the mirror? And if she saw the inability to see what she's doing and how it's
Right.
impacting others, if she just tweaked that and changed it, I
Right.
just imagine where they could have actually gone and where they could have actually taken and influenced so many people and so many organizations for the better.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
But there was one thing I did learn from them, and that was the leader I didn't want to be like. So there was a learning for me too, right?
Yeah, I guess that's a good point, right? That hatred or that fear is some people's power. If that's how you want to be perceived, God bless you.
Yeah.
But I don't like that.
Yeah. Good on you. Go knock yourself out. Go for it. It's all good.
Exactly. Exactly.
So we've actually covered it already a little bit here, Amanda, but I think the thing question would be the title of the show is called Leadership is Changing. When I say that title, that statement, is there anything else you want to add to it? What does it mean for you?
I think we pretty much touched on the way I feel about the evolution of it is just like, I believe that there, in some ways, is more compassion, but there certainly needs to be way more. From what I've witnessed, there, at least the way I run my business, there's more compassion. I can't speak for anybody else. But if it's going to change, it needs to start from like a moral perspective.
Right.
And that really needs, and honestly, it shouldn't have to come down to legislation, right? Like it shouldn't have to come down to federal and state legislation. It should just come down to being a person and understanding like a mom is spent and trying to do it all, or a dad is spent and trying to do it all, has a kid at home that's waking up at all hours. Like, give some compassion. If they're not lucky, a friend of ours works for a very large medical company here in New York, and his wife is a doctor, has to be at work, and he is taking care of kids, driving them back and forth while working from home. And like his boss will check in with him at 9:31. Are you at your desk? Where are you? He just got done driving both kids to school. So like it's things like that. It's just unnecessary. If his work is getting done, I understand we're here to make money, but like it is those things, if you chip away at and just keep moving in that direction where you take away that like inhumane aspect of business, I believe you'll get an evolution in leadership and change that you're looking for.
Yeah, it's interesting because I actually coached a guy who was in England and he was doing 80 plus hour weeks. But get this, on Thursday afternoon at 4 o'clock, he felt guilty in leaving the office to go and watch his kids swim for 1 hour. And it was just like, what? Now, a lot of it is his own thinking, but
Sure.
also a lot of it was pushed by the leadership too, about being at the office and doing this and doing that, and which was really quite interesting to see. The guy, we had to help him to understand that. But you know what? At the end of the day, he could be made redundant tomorrow, retrenched. He could also, and then what? And then, so exactly. So there's all these different things we've got to think about and look at as well. Yeah. Hey, look,
Yep.
we've talked about leadership is changing. I think we've covered that off beautifully. You and I seem to be living in a world that seems to be getting faster and faster time. And even if we think about the technology that you and I are using today, you're on one side of the
Yes.
world, I'm on the other side of the world. We can see each other. We're recording this this audio, I should say, and it's amazing. And it seems to be getting faster all the time. Because of this fast-paced changing world that we live in, what does a leader need to do to be successful in that fast-paced world?
Hmm. Well, are you asking this question for the leader or for the people listening to the leader? Because
All right, let's take
I
both
guess,
both perspectives. Let's take both sides,
okay.
if you're okay with that.
So for the leader itself, I would say there needs to be a form of work-life balance because that, especially here in New York, does not exist. I'm not sure if it's any better by you, but it's certainly not good here. What is expected of you is just ultimately not feasible. And so you burn out and it's a trickle down effect on your employees, on your business, on your kids, and so on and so forth. That I would say for the employer. For the employee,
Well, I think they have to look at the work-life balance too, right?
of course, yeah, but I think for them, the more important thing is to not staying silent as to what they want, right? Because oftentimes you're afraid to ask for what you want. If you don't ask, you won't get. And so a lot of people just stay in an environment they're unhappy with, getting the money that they're unhappy with because they're afraid to say how they feel. So I would say, of course, work-life balance is important regardless if you're an employer or employee. But I think more primary than that is effectuating the change that you want to see, which would ultimately be advocating for yourself.
And do you think that the employees today are looking at leaders and expecting more from them, or has that changed?
It's an interesting point. I certainly think that the employees today in a post-COVID world expect a lot more leadway from an employer than that is actually fair. So everybody wants to sit in their pajamas and work from home and get paid top dollar. That's ultimately what they want, right? And in some businesses, it's feasible and it's some it's not. But let's call us a spade here. My husband and I run our firm. The work product we do at our house is way different than the work product we do at our office because we have two little kids. We have responsibilities at home. There's a thousand things going on. And so the same would apply for an employee or anyone else for that matter, unless you're like a single person living in your flat, enjoying your life and just sipping your coffee and working.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's something we need to think about too is why do we go to work? What is it? Is it because of satisfaction? I think a lot of people, I interviewed this guy a couple of years ago on the episode, on the podcast, and he talked about a lot of leaders or people in business and that are trying to achieve things and get out there and do them, working long hours and things like that. But the thing that was missing for them was the fulfillment and feeling
Mm.
fulfilled. And I think the beautiful thing about having a business whereby, or a role that you have as a leader that you could do both in the office and at home, is that you feel more fulfilled because you are around the family a little bit more. And even if you are
Sure.
single and you were living by yourself, but you're in your own environment, it's a little bit different than being in the office. But then other people feel like they want to be in the office because they want to be around colleagues and people to learn off each other and socialize a little bit more. So that's their fulfillment as well. So I think it's different strokes
Sure.
for different folks, if I can put it that way, that
Yeah.
terminology. Yeah.
Uh, I agree with that very much, but I'll say in a post COVID world where working at home became a very normal thing, because still, even here, most of the court appearances are still virtual. And I don't believe now, 4 years later, that's going to change. Like, I think we just figured it out, the technology. It took a very long time to get there, but it's still for the most part. And it's amazing because we would travel an hour, hour and a half to get to a court appearance for 5 minutes and then have to travel back. It saves money for the client. It saves time for you. But where I was getting at was my husband often says that COVID was a blessing for him in the sense where our daughter, we have two children. My daughter is turning 4 next week. And she was born in the lockdown of the pandemic, like April 17th, 2020, 5 days after Governor Cuomo's executive order that my husband was even allowed in the delivery room. So it was like, and of course, New York, it was very, very bad here. So, like, horrible time. But what he always says is, it's now almost 4 years later, and he has not missed a day of her life. Like not a day, not a minute, every milestone, every great moment he was there for. He wasn't off in court. He wasn't here. He wasn't there. And the same for my son, who is 21 months, that work from home balance has trickled to him. So same could apply for him, born 2 years later. So that really is the blessing that has developed from it and is something that employer employee should, embrace because it's a wonderful work life balance, if you will.
Awesome. That's an amazing way to look at it. Yeah. Hey, tell me, if you had to get your crystal ball out here now and think about the future, where do you see leadership being in 5 years from now?
Oh boy. In Tahiti with a pina colada? No,
That's
no,
called an offsite, isn't it? That's a meeting.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it would probably just be it would I was on another podcast and they asked me what my definition of success is. And so in the same breath, I would probably say that any person that I was considered a leader to or an influence to, that they looked at me with nothing but compassion and that I was there for them and that I made time for them, which is the same way I viewed success and said it in that other podcast. But basically, yeah, if I have the ability to influence somebody and help somebody, that they look at me in that lens, that I was helpful and compassionate and loving and caring. So like 5 years from now, that would be the leader I would like to be.
Excellent. Oh, it's been a real pleasure talking with you, Amanda. It's some really, really cool stuff that you've shared. If our listeners are wanting to get hold of you, where should they go?
So our firm is the Frank Law Firm, PC, and the phone number is 516-246-5577, or they can email me, amanda@frankfirmpc.com.
And they should be able to get that contact details on the website, right?
Yes, of course. Yeah,
yeah,
frankfirmpc.com.
yeah, cool. We'll put that into the show notes, listeners. So that's really great. Amanda, once again, thank you so much for joining me on today's session. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Dennis. It's been an absolute pleasure. You run a beautiful show. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Well, there you go, listeners. It's the ability to change someone's life. It's easy to leave change to others, but what are you going to do around it? This is the key here. Willpower defines the leader. Hey, it's a pleasure being with you. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Gianoutsos. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.